Tata Sons board will meet tomorrow and discuss a potential deal with Jet Airways. Now, sources tell CNBC TV18 that Tatas are more keen on buying stake in Airline as many valuable assets of Jet are not transferable. Utkarsh Chaturvedi is here with those details. Utkarsh, so what are these transferable assets of Jet that seems to have inspired Tata Sons? Utkarsh.
So, Ashmit, as you said, what we are picking up from our sources is that Tata Sons is more interested in buying the stake in the company rather than just assets. Now, what our sources also indicate is that the most of the valuable assets in the company are not transferable, as you said. So, for example, the P-car routes in cities like Delhi, Bombay do hold a lot of value, but it cannot be sold. Same goes for parking spaces and international codeshare agreements. Remember, what Jet Airways also brings on table are international hubs like Abu Dhabi and Amsterdam, which can be very crucial for the international journey of Vistara. Also, Jet's tangible assets do not really hold much value. What Jet Airways has currently are some 777s, 330s and 737 aircraft, which are almost 8 to 10 years old, and anyways, Jet is facing trouble to lease them out. Also, what's on offer is Jet Privilege Program. It's an important database and a regular customer base of the airline, which hold a lot of value and is very important for any management running Jet Airways. Of course, with that comes a huge pile of debt and outstanding payments to various parties, but that is something which Tata Sons is yet to take a call on. Hopefully, more clarity will emerge after the board meeting tomorrow.
Earlier this week, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry notified that all matches of the upcoming Hockey World Cup are of national importance, quote-unquote, and effectively push Star India into a tight spot. The notification essentially means that Star India will have to share the live feed of all of these matches with Doordarshan, which would then telecast this on its terrestrial and DTH platform. But according to the Sports Act of 2007, only the live feeds of the semi-finals and the final matches are to be shared with Doordarshan. So why the sudden notification? The Information and Broadcasting Ministry has argued that since the event is being held in India, it is an event, again, quote-unquote, of national importance. Private broadcasters are crying foul and say the notification is arbitrary and unfair as it comes less than 15 days before the start of the event. Also, could this just be the tip of the iceberg? Remember, last month, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry proposed to amend the Sports Act. This in order to ensure that a larger number of Indian viewers have access to sporting events that the government deems to be, again, quote-unquote, of national importance. Now, if these amendments go through, Doordarshan will be able to transmit sporting events not only through its terrestrial and DTH networks, but also via private cable networks and other DTH networks. Private sport broadcasters argued that this proposed amendment are unsporting as it virtually forces broadcasters who've paid big bucks to bag sporting rights to share live feeds for free. The proposed amendments have been made open for public consultation till the 31st of December. We will discuss that and more with our guests. Let me go across to Ashmit Kumar first. Ashmit, explain to our viewers the legal facets of this matter. What exactly does the amendment propose?
Right, so the amendments that have been proposed by the MIB would effectively translate into sports broadcasts then being broadcast by cable operators as well as private DTH networks, which is a big concern as far as sports broadcasters are concerned. Let's, in fact, take a look at what is exactly happening. There are two acts to keep in mind. One is, of course, the Sports Act. Section 3.1 is important here. The Section 3.1 essentially says that broadcasters need to share it with Prasar Bharati, which would be, and then Prasar Bharati would then transmit it to DD National and DD Sports, as well as the DTH network, which is Free Dish. Now, this is something that sports broadcasters are comfortable with. What they're not comfortable with is this third caveat here. The government is seeking to, in fact, push the broadcast to be included on private cable networks as well as DTH networks, and this is a concern that they've expressed. The reason that, in fact, the centre is citing it is this particular act, the Cable Television Networks Act, whereby the government essentially says that this act provides for DD National to be carried on all private networks, and hence that effectively defeats the big $1 million that sports broadcasters are putting out, as this it would anyways be carried free of cost on private networks. Now, the Supreme Court judgment deliberated on the issue and clarified in August of 2017 that no case has been made out, that there is no linkage between the two acts, that the government cannot force the broadcasters to have these sports broadcasts on private television networks, and on the back of that, holding that no case has been made out for broadcast of matches on private cable or private DTH networks. Now, the amendment that the government is coming across to circumvent this judgment is that they will amend Section 3(1). They will draw the linkage between the two acts and essentially say that mandatory signal sharings of such sporting events with other networks where it is mandatory to show the DD channels, effectively saying that DD National will have to be carried by all networks, effectively saying that all the sports broadcast would then be available free of cost to all private cable operators as well as DTH networks. Now, this is not the only worry. The second worry is, of course, what constitutes national importance, as that is the criteria for which the government decides what can be broadcast free of cost and what needn't be. Now, as of right now, only international matches where players represent India. Is that what's constituting national importance? Is IPL of a national importance? It's a private commercial league. Are private commercial sporting leagues also national importance? So there is a great deal of ambiguity with that as well. As of right now, the decision-making process is that the discretion rests completely with the MIB and that the MIB passes notifications without consultations. So a number of legal worries that stare the broadcasters in the face. We'll, of course, have to wait more clarity once the government formalizes a position. Back to you.
Well, thanks very much, Ashmit, for comprehensively setting out the context for what we are about to discuss. Joining us now to discuss this further, Nandan Kamath, Principal Lawyer at, also with us, Atul Pandey, CMD of Sports and Live Media Entertainment, Chintamani Rao, Independent Media Consultant with us. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Atul, since you're here with me in the Delhi studio, let me start by asking you, this was a matter that seemed to have been settled by the Supreme Court in 2017, and now it looks like through this public consultation process that ends at the end of the year, the government intends to bring about amendments that will virtually make that 2017 Supreme Court order redundant.
Absolutely, and it's very surprising because 2017, 2007, when the Sports Act was passed, I thought this issue was dead and buried. Because the reality is that sports broadcasters are putting in a lot of money and basically building the business models on the fact that there will be exclusivity. And as we have seen in the few auctions which have happened in the last couple of years, the sporting rights values are increasing, which eventually helps Indian sports in Indian federations. But clearly by this kind of a rollback of sorts, if that's the word I may use, it puts the whole sporting broadcast business in a lot of conundrums, because really the old model on which they had built their business is pretty much redundant if it happens. So yes, it would be a serious worry for all sports broadcasters.
Nandan, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Very quickly, let's just get the legal positions out of the way. As Ashmit very categorically pointed out for us what the Supreme Court order had said. Now, in light of the notification that was issued last night, in fact, to deal with the Indian hockey tournament, and that now being made of national importance, or being defined as an event of national importance by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and that being done literally a fortnight before the event itself. Could this be an important precedent? Because, the issue of the amendment of the Sports Act itself is still open for consultation till the end of the year. But could this be an important precedent that could be challenged in court?
Shireen, I'm not sure we can actually challenge this in court, because there's just such a wide remit for the government to notify these events of national importance without any real criteria. And I think the lateness of this notification certainly comes as a surprise, because even under the rules itself, the private broadcaster actually has to notify Doordarshan 45 days before an event that it intends to broadcast an event, and then it's obliged to share. So it doesn't seem to be sort of an equivalent quid pro quo when just 15 days before an event you go and notify all of the matches of an event as matches of national importance.
Okay.
Just to take you back a little bit, initially only the matches that India played and the semi-finals and finals were notified, and suddenly you have the shift where an entire tournament is notified. So it's quite unprecedented in that sense.
No, so is there no legal recourse for private broadcasters?
In this instance, I can't see any successful challenge to the notification itself, because I think the remit and the powers of the central government are quite significant. So I don't see much of a way out with respect to the Hockey World Cup itself. But certainly, I think it's important that this actually becomes a basis to really look at our mandatory sharing laws anew.
Chintamani Rao, on this larger issue of reviewing the rules pertaining to mandatory sharing, but the point that we're hearing here from Nandan is that it's virtually a fait accompli that the government has passed and broadcasters have no choice but to carry it forward.
Plus, I think there are really two separate issues here. One is, of course, the immediate, which is the Hockey World Cup. As Nandan said, not much can be done about that because this is very much within the framework of the 2007 Act and the rules. The larger question is about the sharing on cable, the Doordarshan, well, the proposed amendment, which will allow Doordarshan to carry the signal on cable and satellite. That is a huge one. And in fact, in this whole question of signal sharing, there is one part of it is what are events of national importance, criteria, etc. I'll leave that aside for the moment. I have three questions I'd like someone to convince me on. One is, why a clean feed? Why, if the signal has to be shared because the events of national importance in the interest of the public, does the public also, is it also required that the public must only see Doordarshan sold ads? Two, why cable and satellite? Or for all the obvious reasons. And three, this ridiculous ticker that has to be carried. The ticker that tells the viewer, you don't have to watch it here, you can go to Doordarshan and watch it. Totally absurd in my view. And this needs to be challenged.
Now the fear that private broadcasters are dealing with, that in light of the thinking that the government seems to be putting on the table, that sporting events like IPL could be next on the table.
Absolutely, Shireen. I think one of the big concerns here is the lack of any criteria itself in determining what an event of national importance might be. Unlike other countries like the UK and the EU as well as Australia, where there is very clear criteria on what falls within the remit of national importance and not, this is not a justiciable matter. So any event that is notified by the government is an event of national importance, and that leads to a certain uncertainty at the time of bidding itself of, is there regulatory risk that, for lack of a better term, some of these rights are going to be nationalized. That is not a risk that a broadcaster is going to take very lightly. And as much as the broadcasters are sort of the immediate, I would say, face the negative effects, the people who are going to have to be up in arms are really the federations, both, I would say, national federations as well as international federations.
We're running out of time, gentlemen, so I'm going to give each one of you final comments. Atul, I'll start by asking you, the premise for legal challenge, if that is the route that industry will have to take. You've got the CJI, who was the judge on the two-judge bench that heard the matter in 2017 and decided in what industry believes has been a fair and equitable manner. So what will be the legal premise for industry's challenge, if at all?
Well, the legal premise clearly is that there were certain, it's a commercial legal premise, the way I look at it, that there were certain assumptions I made while making bids for certain businesses. And if the assumptions are not going to hold in the future, then either I need to be equitably allowed to get out of those bids, or this whole notification and this decisioning process should be relooked at. Because clearly there's some of the sports, especially cricket, the numbers are so big that it could make or break a company or a business. So clearly I think there is a very strong legal premise.
Strong legal case. Chintamani Rao, final words from you.
Well, my premise for challenging the proposed amendment is very simple, that it is not in the public interest. Why is it not in the public interest? Because of all that we just discussed, it is going to impact sports and sports broadcasting first and sports as a whole. That cannot be in the public interest.
Okay. Will not be in the public interest. Nandan, final comments.
Yeah, just final comments. What might be in the public interest may not necessarily be what the public is interested in. So I think it's very important we get clarity on why we're doing things and we do it with very specific objectives in mind.
Gentlemen, for this evening, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18 with what the industry would hope to seek from the government.
Classic Legends, a subsidiary of the Mahindra Group, has resurrected the Java brand and has the popular motorcycles back in the Indian market. Now, it has launched 3 new bikes, the Java 42 and the Bobber Custom Java Perak. Now, the Java will cost 1.64 lakh rupees, while the Java 42 will sell for 1.55 lakh rupees. The third variant, Java Perak, is priced at 1.89 lakh rupees. Now, the 2 motorcycles are powered by a 293cc single-engine cylinder. The costliest of the bunch, that's Java Perak, is powered by a 334cc engine. The Enforcement Directorate has told the Delhi High Court that it has initiated a probe against Flipkart and Amazon for alleged violations of forex norms. The court is set to hear the matter on the 19th of November. Former president of Indigo, Aditya Ghosh, has checked into Oyo Hotels as the CEO for India and South Asia. He will report to the founder and group CEO of Oyo, Ritesh Agarwal. Yet another resignation at Yes Bank. Former SBI chairman O.P. Bhatt has resigned as the external expert on the search and selection committee of the bank. He resigned, citing that there may be a potential conflict of interest. And the big global headline, Theresa May has toughened her stance on Brexit deal, even as many of her cabinet ministers have resigned opposing the proposal. May has told British lawmakers that choice was clear: back her Brexit deal, leave with no deal, or have no Brexit at all. Are you planning to buy a new home? Well, an EPFO account might be all that you need. Sources have told CNBC TV18 that the Employees Provident Fund Organization is working with the National Housing Association to devise a plan wherein your EPFO contribution might do the job of a housing EMI. Now, how will this model work? Yash Jain is here with us to explain to us what this model will do and how it works. Take a look.
Well, just to give you a headline out of this new housing scheme, which is expected to be discussed by the EPFO, essentially any house which gets allotted to any EPFO subscriber under this housing scheme, the monthly installment for that particular house is expected to be deducted from that EPFO subscriber's EPF corpus itself, hence making the entire process of home buying much more simple and convenient for every EPFO subscriber, essentially for employees like you and me. Also, from our sources in the EPFO, we've been given to understand the broad idea in the way this entire housing model would really work. And to take you through that particular model, in the first step, the Employees Provident Fund Organization, which is the EPFO, is expected to form a separate body which is called the NHA, or the National Housing Association. National Housing Association will have its own board and independent board members as compared to EPFO. From this point, NHA is expected to reach out to various state governments, be it Goa, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat, seeking to acquire state-owned land parcels from these state governments for the purpose of acquisition. Now, once these state-owned land parcels have been acquired, then NHA is expected to float tenders inviting builders and developers to develop residential properties on the state-owned land parcel, and this marks the end of the twofold process. Once this process ends, which is the acquisition of the land and development of that particular piece of land, then NHA will reach the fundraising stage, where importantly NHA is expected to float something which will be called housing bonds, which will then later on be subscribed by the Employees Provident Fund Organization, helping NHA raise funds. Now, the funds which would be raised would be then paid to the state government for acquisition of that state-owned land parcel, as well as developers and builders for developing that particular land into residential properties. What does it mean for an EPFO subscriber? Any EPFO subscriber who's interested in buying a house which has been developed by NHA under this particular scheme, he then has to reach out to the respective EPFO commissioner, expressing his interest and filling the designated form which will be allotted to this entire scheme. Then from this particular point, the EPFO commissioner goes and assesses that particular subscriber's EPF corpus. Let's assume he's got a corpus of 20,000 rupees and he contributes an additional 3,000 every month to that particular corpus. Of course, the actuarial team will decide an amount which will be deducted every month as monthly installment towards the house which has been allotted to that particular EPFO subscriber. So this will be the entire process. Of course, it sounds like a simple process and a very convenient process, but the key lies in the implementation. But truly, if it gets implemented, then it will be a housing scheme by, for and of the EPFO subscribers.